Okay, welcome to this little tutorial. This will be the tutorial number 1, intro to just getting comfortable with the processing environment for the processing class. I already have processing up and running, so that's the first thing we want to make sure we're doing. So down below your Docker or wherever you have it in your applications, fire up processing, and you will get the development environment for processing. It's just what processing calls a sketch document. I'm assuming installing, where this is placed in your documents folder and such. So I'll just skip through that. Very simple, and as I said in class the other day, after years of teaching computer animation, using Maya and ZBrush and programs like that have buttons and menus everywhere, very strange to me using an application that has just this is the extent of its GUI that we have up here. So we have run and stop, which we'll see here in a second, and then new, open, save, and export application, which we don't need to worry about right now. So let's just, as a starter, let's just make sure processing is working on our machine, no problem. So let's write our first little program. I'm going to type this keyword here. Oops. And don't worry about what these mean for now. We just want to see how this works. So we've typed a little bit of instruction here. I'm going to press play or run, so we call it. And you can see it opens up a little window, and it gives me a circle. So I said ellipse, and it moved it to a certain set of coordinates. Talk about that in a second. And it made it a certain size. And it has some default things that it was doing because I didn't give any different instructions. So if your program did not do that, you may need to stop and see what's going on with processing. I won't try to diagnose your problems through the tutorial. All right, so let's go ahead and delete this. Well, in fact, let's delete this. So just as a basic introduction, this is your statement, your first little computer program, and we've used this keyword ellipse that's part of the API for processing. And then inside of the parentheses here, we have the parameters that are required for the ellipse, and we'll talk about those in a second. And then at the end of any set of instructions, any like single instruction, we have a semicolon which ends the statement. So if you're not familiar with computer syntax, there are certain things that we don't have to pay attention to. For example, if I put a bunch of spaces in here and press run, it still will do the same thing. It does not care about that. Let's just undo those. Okay. But it does care if I do this. Okay. So it doesn't know how to complete the set of instructions. So there are other little things that we'll learn about syntax as we go along. All right. The other thing you should know is if we highlight the word here and right-click, we can ask to see it in the reference. And let me make this fit a little bit better. Okay, so here we have the reference guide. You can see that we have ellipse. It gives us a little example. That looks pretty similar to what we just did. A description, what the syntax should be. Okay, so the keyword with its parameters, and then a definition of what those parameters are. Also nice is the related information down here. So that if there are other keywords, commands that you would want to use, that's there. So get used to using the reference. If we click on language, processing has this all grouped into things that obviously make sense, curves, and all the commands for curves. Okay. So, but if you know what the name of the thing is that you're looking for, and you just need to find it alphabetically, this is very effective as well. You can find this on the processing website, and because we did it in the application, this is like the help menu through a browser that is coming locally, so you don't need the internet to be able to access the reference. So I'll go ahead and just put that away for now. And let's go ahead and delete. And let's start over here at the very beginning. Now, one of the things I mentioned in my syllabus is the importance of commenting. One, commenting in your code is just good form. It's considered best practice so that one, most important to you, you would be able to understand what it is that you wrote. So you write a script and or a program and you do some drawing machine with it or something, and then you come back several months later and you can't remember what ex2 is for a variable or something like that, or what a certain chunk of code or a special function is doing. It would be good to have some comments that say, hey, this is the thing that takes the x coordinate and converts it and maps it to screen space or something like that. So to keep that going, I also want to show the connection between writing pseudocode, the idea of kind of like using broken English to describe what it is that you want to do, and how that relates to turning it into code on your screen. So in this first little program, we'll just say create a canvas that is 500 pixels by 500 pixels. And let's draw a line from the right, let's see, upper left hand corner, and oops, to the center of the screen. Right. Never thought I'd be doing a tutorial where I was just typing stuff, and that would be relevant to what we were trying to do in class. All right, so these are the instructions we want to do. So in processing, to create a canvas, the thing that we want our program to exist in once we run it is size, and then we just put in 500 by 500. Okay. And then the second part of this, excuse me, is line. You can see these are very hard to understand. Why would you use the word line for drawing a line? Okay, so for this, one thing that we haven't done yet is talk about the coordinate system. So just go ahead and follow my lead here. Line requires, well, one type of line requires 4 parameters. So we need the xy coordinates of one end of the line and xy coordinates of the other end of the line. So let's just say 0 and 0. And then let's say 250 by 250. Now let's run that. Okay, you can see we get a little sketch right here. So this up here in the upper left hand corner happens to be 0, 0 in the processing world. And 250 by 250 is this, and just because I knew that we were using a 500 by 500 canvas, that happens to be the center of the screen. Right? So X across here, Y down. We'll talk in more detail about coordinate systems when we get to using transforms. So that's what we've done. This runs through here and just completes this and throws us up on a canvas. Let's go ahead and put this away. Let's try to do something a little more interactive with this. So we're going to use these keywords already defined in Processing's API. So again, we can right-click and see that mouse Y and mouse X are, as they would say, system variables, right, that we can refer to. So what this should do is wherever my mouse is on the screen, that's the location on the one end of that line. So if I go ahead and hit run, you can see it doesn't, there's no line. We're not doing anything. And in class, we actually made this little teaser for the students to run through and try to figure out why. And the reason is, because I can't ask you through the power of tutorial technology, is that right now what we're doing is just one set of instructions. Processing is going through this line of code and says, I'll do this, and it gets down to this and says, I will do this. And because as the program fires up right off the bat, it hasn't quite recognized where this is because the window just opened. So as a default, that very first tiny little frame, that's probably it's reading 0, 0 because it hasn't picked up that the mouse is over the screen. And then when it gets done with this instruction, it just stops. We haven't told the processing sketch that we want it to keep going. Just keep every frame, look for the mouse. So in essence, kind of an animation, if you want to think of it that way. So what we need to do to make that happen is use processing's two set functions that processing uses. Basically every sketch that you run will use this. All right, so let's go back up here. So this would be, if I was going to comment this, is set up our sketch to run. This one will be keep looping through these instructions. Okay. So this is going to be void set up, and I'll explain that in a second. Right, so let's pay attention to the fact that, so void is a way of identifying what kind of function we're going to do here, and void is telling the computer program, do this set of instructions, but you don't need to return any info. Sometimes later on in the class you'll see we'll write functions, and you want the function to run around and produce a certain result and return a number or a character or something like that. And in this case, we don't really care about that. We just want it to do this function, which means go through and make sure these instructions are done, and only do it once, and then go on to the next thing. All right, so we have set up. The other thing too is the function is followed by these parentheses. These parentheses are here because later on you might do functions where you need to put parameters into them, like we have with size here. But in this case, for setup and for the next one we do, you'll never need to put anything in there. And then the last thing are these curly brackets. So we start with, we call our function, we put the curly bracket, and then what we get here is a code block. So this is all the set of instructions within that block to be done once. Okay? And we always have to make sure we close the curly brackets. And we'll use this over and over again, and this is always a source of errors in code for even advanced programmers because they miss their bracket somewhere. All right, so the next one is draw. So void draw, again with our parentheses and the curly brackets, and there we go. So let's just go ahead and press run. Okay. Yay! So we've created our first little drawing machine. All right, so you can see that it's just running along and piling up on the canvas where that line is. All right, so let's go. Let's add one more thing to this. So we're doing mouse X and mouse Y. So these are kind of system terms. The other, another one that we can use here, maybe to help with the aesthetics, because right now we're drawing from that corner. It's kind of hard to design from drawing in that corner. So let's just add okay. So it's just running along, making our little drawing, and it's a decent place to start. If you take some time as an artist or as a designer, instead of just randomly making some marks, you could really start to make something with this. And this is, there's only a few lines of code on there, so we're already making we're doing some sketching. I think it's the best way to think of it. We're already starting to make a visual sketch through here. All right, so I think that's close to 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Again, this is just meant to get you started. In the next tutorial, we'll maybe start to add a few other little pieces to this, other little bits of maybe a few things, introduction to logic, how we can maybe change when this starts drawing on the canvas. We'll also talk about refreshing the canvas. So, but things to remember here that would be most important is remember that you have a help menu with the reference of all these terms. do not, and I repeat this, do not try to memorize every single one of these things. Okay, certainly you'll get to the point where you remember, hey, I'm going to use size, and it's just going to be burned into your brain. But there are going to be times when you're trying to write code, it's somewhere in here, and you're just going to have to use that reference. So when I first started coding and processing, I just made this my homepage off the website. So I was always looking at it and getting familiar with these things. All right. The next thing, just those basics of syntax that we talked about. Commenting is a very important thing as you go along. Certainly this is done very simplistically, and I don't know if you need to comment every single thing as we get going. Midway through the semester, I'd hope you wouldn't say set up our sketch to run and put setup there. I'm sure you would know what that means. But as you get further and further, make sure that you comment enough that people would understand and you understand if you had to come back to it very quickly what was happening in your code. Again, remember we'll be using setup and draw basically in everything. Okay, that's the end, and I'll try to post tutorial 2 a little later.